C'est un bonheur de vous savoir parmi les ambassadeurs certifiés de Process Communication Model. Déjà 38 ans que ça dure en français. Depuis le premier certifié en Belgique, Michel Chalude lui-même. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes plus de 4000 formateurs et coachs certifiés dans 56 pays. Bonsoir et bonjour pour nos amis du Québec. C'est un grand plaisir de vous convier à cet événement unique. Merci d'être avec nous ce soir. À mes yeux, PCM a bien grandi dans notre langue grâce aux bouche à oreille. Parce que PCM fonctionne tout le temps avec tout le monde. Parce que c'est un outil pour une différence au quotidien. Nous continuerons à investir dans la tech et le marketing pour vous soutenir. Déjà 34 ans que j'ai eu le plaisir de le rencontrer. La troisième génération, les petits-enfants des premiers certifiés PCM, commencent à s'intéresser à ces découvertes sur le comportement humain. Après 7 ans en dehors de la scène, nous avons la grande chance de t'accueillir, Dr Taibi Kahler. Un grand merci d'être là avec nous ce soir. Mickaël Dufourneaud, notre directeur des opérations, est prêt pour cette conversation authentique. Et vous, êtes-vous prêts pour les réponses à vos questions?
Our questions.
All right.
Oui.
Thank you for being here, Taibi.
Très bien.
Here's the
Merci
introduction.
ici, Taibi.
My pleasure. My goodness.
Oh my goodness! Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to say a few words in French to introduce the way we're going to proceed as we discussed together, and then we're going to start with dealing with all the questions that we had. Donc, je suis fier, honoré, content de pouvoir interviewer notre cher Dr Taibi Kahler ce soir. Merci à lui, merci à vous d'être aussi motivé, passionné, toujours plus curieux d'avoir des grandes indications sur PCM. PCM évolue tout le temps et nous avons la chance de pouvoir continuer à retrouver son créateur pour pouvoir retourner à la source, chercher des informations. Nous avons vu à quel point c'était important pour vous de pouvoir poser des questions, car nous allons, comme Margot l'a dit, nous avons reçu une liste d'à peu près 300 questions, plus de 300 questions. Donc, je vous dis que ça n'a pas été une mince affaire que de faire le tri dans toutes ces questions. On a pris le temps de préparer ce webinaire ensemble, donc on a fait une répétition. Et en fait, pour nous, dans le tri des questions, ce qui a été d'emblée évident, c'est qu'elles se regroupaient toutes par grands thèmes et que certaines étaient redondantes, pas dans la qualité, mais parce que la plupart, bien sûr, étaient d'une grande qualité et très pertinentes. Mais c'est surtout parce qu'on pouvait les classer facilement. Donc, les grands thèmes que nous avons choisis, c'est très logique. D'abord, c'est l'histoire de PCM, le PCM Story. Ensuite, c'était la structure de personnalité. Pas beaucoup de questions qui se rapportaient à la structure de personnalité, the personality structure. Et ensuite, dans la structure de personnalité, quelque chose qui paraît évident et qui n'est pas tant que ça, puisque du coup, il y a encore beaucoup de recherches, c'est la base. Et puis, un des grands sujets, des sujets les plus passionnants en PCM, puisque c'est le cœur de la structure, c'est la dynamique de la phase et la dynamique du changement de phase. So, the phase and phasing and phase change. Et du coup, on conclura là-dessus. Et il y avait beaucoup de questions qui se référaient aussi au stress et à la présentation de la dynamique du stress, donc des séquences de stress en PCM, puisqu'on sait qu'il y a eu pas mal d'évolutions là-dessus, et spécifiquement en France. Donc, il y a eu beaucoup de questions autour de la présentation du stress. So, the last topic is stress. So. Donc, merci à tous. Évidemment, je clôture là-dessus. Nous n'aurons pas le temps de répondre à toutes ces questions car nous n'avons qu'une heure et que nous allons tenir ce timing. Il est déjà 18h06 et du coup, nous perdons du temps. Donc, allons le plus vite possible vers ce pourquoi nous sommes là aujourd'hui. On conclura tout à l'heure sur comment on va faire pour traiter toutes les autres questions et elles ne resteront pas sans réponse. C'est important pour nous de pouvoir y répondre à toutes. Donc, on vous fera des propositions concrètes pour pouvoir répondre à toutes les autres questions. Thank you so much, Taibi. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. Do you want to say a few words for the introduction?
Yes, my goodness. First, thank you, Cyril, for making this possible. And Mickaël for helping us through this. And all your staff and those who are helping produce this, my goodness. And all of you who are watching, it's my honor and privilege to be speaking to you. Thank you for your commitment to PCM. Thank you for caring about why it's important. Thanks for all the hard work to get certified. Thank you for imagining a world in which people communicate better. Thank you for spreading this because it works. And in every household, yes, Cyril, I love that. Good gracious. And thanks for the creativity. Oh, I love the new marketing. Good gracious. And a special shout out to my fellow certified master trainers, Gerard, Nate, John, and Jerome. Isn't it neat that people recognize people by their first names now? Wow, that's goodness. Okay. Mickaël, please give me your questions.
Thank you so much, David. So, as I said, there is a few themes, topics around those questions. So we selected the first ones around the PCM story, and PCM story is, of course, correlated to your personal story. So there was Nathalie Graham and Jean-Louis Torres, for example, that were interested in quel a été l'élément déclencheur pour PCM? What was the trigger? How did you start PCM?
You know, I thought about that, and it happened 50 years ago. Oh my gosh. And it was when I realized the importance of the difference between content, what we are talking about, and how we say it. And that was the beginning of my understanding. Process is so important. In the long run, it may very well be much more important than the content. And the way that happened was I had discovered drivers, our first degree distress, and I realized when inviting someone out of a driver, there's not just one content way to do that. It depends upon the specific driver. If it's please you, what we know to do is to be nurturing. If it's one of the be perfects, then what we know is to give information. I realized, oh my goodness, it isn't what I'm saying, it's how I say it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, that's a whole new world out there of having a mindset of move to how it's said to someone and then realize the content of it. So many, many years ago.
Thank you, Tim. And another question that I liked was de Carmen Tessou, alors pardon pour la prononciation, mais quel est votre plus beau moment de joie profonde lié au modèle PCM? What was your most beautiful moment of deep joy related to PCM?
Wow. I really had to think about that one. Let's see, thinking about a feeling. Well, that says something about myself. I realize that the greatest joy that I have is seeing the aha that people have when they realize the value of process in their life, with what it means to them and the joy that it must bring to them when they say, oh my goodness. And so that's what's important to do with my spouse. that's what I can do with my children to have a better relationship. That's how I can motivate. That's why this person does that. And so the joy comes in seeing the joy in others who have embraced the wonderful value of PCM.
Great. A question that was related directly to that. It's for you, what is the most important discovery around your model? C'est quelle est la découverte la plus importante, la plus puissante de votre modèle? C'est Sophie Berriot qui avait posé cette question.
Yes. Cyril, many years ago, I believe we were having breakfast together somewhere, and you had asked me that a similar question. And I'm going to respond a little differently today, and perhaps next year I'll respond differently. As you may recall, I believe I said in the clinical model, it was the 4 myths. And in the PCM application, I may have talked about issues. I'm not sure how I responded to that. But when I sift it all down, the most elegant response to that is really quite simple. And that is the most important is process. The most important aspect, I believe, of the model for me is that it's just simply how we say something is so much more important than what we say in the long run, if we really want to communicate with someone.
Une question de Marguerite Chevreuil qui était intéressante, c'était quel est l'effet de PCM sur votre propre vie? Elle l'avait posé en anglais. So what's the best effect of PCM on your own life?
It's being able to understand why I do something and why someone else does something. That gives me a way to stay in my condominium with my personality structure and not tie together the person with a mask that I might see on him or her or myself. And that understanding allows me unconditionally to accept someone as a person, and then also gives me a formula of what to do to help myself get out of my own distress, or possibly help someone else with an intervention invitation.
I have a question that was interesting. I know we talked about it a lot together. It's from Stéphane Villino, pardon si j'écorche le nom encore une fois, des choses à ne pas faire avec ProcessCom. Are there things that we should not do? Are there things not to do with PCM?
Yes. Early on in PCM, I talked about personality type, and it was almost to imply that we have a personality type, and then we use different channels, or we use different perceptions, and that invites someone to make the connection of, oh, personality type must be a person's base. And no, that's just the person's personality used most often with perception. And so it's really important that we continue to realize we are 6 personality types. If I'm a thinker base, do I feel? Yes, when I get in my elevator and go to a floor where my feelings are. And that's going to be my harmonizer floor. Do I have opinions if I'm a thinker base? Well, yes, because I have a persister, personality type, on one of my floors. And so it's so important that we keep that in mind. We're a combination of 6, and on each floor, that's where we go to energize the channel, the perception, the character traits. And so we're 6 types. Let me check my note. I had one more thing I wanted to say about that. Okay.
This is so important because we talked about that, and this is part of the new branding too, and the new identity and the things we've been working on in the pedagogy.
Yes.
Starting by presenting the structure.
I remember now. Oh, goodness gracious. 2 more things. One is, this I learned way back in my transactional analysis days from Dr. Eric Burns' work. And he said something very interesting. He said, when learning a new model that has to do with any kind of behavior, that people are likely to play a game around it. Now, a game is a series of negative kinds of behaviors. They're played unconscious. We're not aware that we do this, but it's still something in distress. And he identified 2 very common games that it's natural, depending on the person's makeup, in our terminology, personality structure, that a person might play. Those 2 games are projective psychiatry and introjective psychiatry. Big words. Here's what they mean. If I were to misuse the information that I received in PCM and I played a game with it, if I played projective psychiatry, I might misuse the information by doing something like, oh, well, that's your persister. And so I identify that as if it's negative something, or if it's introjective psychiatry, oh, that was my harmonizer. Now, so that's a caution that we don't want to do that. The other is that when we have elegantly integrated our learning about PCM and we practice it regularly, when we interact with someone, the person would never know that we had been taught PCM. It's using the model, not talking about the model.
Thank you.
And
processing people.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
That's so great. Thank you for saying that, because this is so close to where we're going with all the new stuff in the pedagogy also, and also with the perceptions and the slight changes that we've made around the perceptions now. So that brings us to all the questions around the base. So there was, I'm not going to say all the names, je vais pas dire le nom de tous les gens parce qu'il y avait vraiment beaucoup de questions autour de la base, et la question principale finalement c'était d'où vient la base. Il y a Jean-François Guise qui a proposé cette question, il y avait le lien avec la vie intra-utérine, il y avait Florence Boucard qui nous avait demandé est-ce que c'est épigénétique, il y avait Sarah Baskevich qui demandait comment ces adaptations avaient été faites dans l'enfance. Il y avait Daniela Betuel aussi qui parlait de est-ce que la base est activiste. Donc je pense que c'est vraiment un sujet qui intéresse tout le monde et qui nous préoccupe, nous pratiquants PCM au quotidien. C'est d'où vient la base? Where is the base coming from, Taibi?
Perception. The base comes from perception. And so the next question is, what causes perception? And that's something that I hope someday we'll be able to neurologically research.
There was a link with epigenetic, and last time you were telling me that perception is like, if I may say, natural, or because that's going to be part of the studies. It's like what we know for sure, if that's something that maybe we want to say again, is that we can observe someone's base very early in age. Would you like to comment that?
Yes. So I do believe we're born with our base. The research study by Stansberry back 20 or 30 years ago indicated that the base will not change. And I think that's certainly the case. Now, epigenetic, golly, I had to go back and get out some of my old books. So there's genetic, which is the basic genes that we have, and epigenetic, which is a nice word indicating what are the environmental, what's the environmental impact on that? Well, that really gets into some of what I'm working on now, and that is an issue resolved or not resolved early in life in one of the 6 developmental stages that I talk about. I'm writing an article on that, and when Rob worked and is going to be doing some editing, and so I'm looking forward to getting that done soon. So the epigenetic aspect of it, the nurture aspect of that which is natural, is very likely related to our concept of psychological needs. Whereas perception may very well be the genetic part of it, the epigenetic part of it may very well be what is the influence from our environment, our caretakers, our parents, in helping us resolve the early issue of our phase in one of these developmental stages.
Right, because that also relates to a question from Vincent Gary that was wondering if there's a link between base of the parents and the children, and that's the structure and the children development stages. There was a lot of questions around that. Donc, il y a eu beaucoup de questions sur comment se développe la structure et justement, est-ce qu'il y a un lien, c'était une question de Vincent Gary, est-ce qu'il y a un lien entre la structure des parents et la structure des enfants? Et je pense que la réponse va être claire et sans appel. Dr. Taibi, is there a link between the children's base and the parents' base from your point of view?
Research to identify that. However, I would love to have neurological studies to look at that. We can also, if we take some historical family data, and we had access to that would give us a lot of information as well. The simple answer is there's no hardcore research for that. I think the interesting correlations would be whatever determines perception and whatever structure mom and dad have, or the caretakers, their structure might have more to do with our issues being resolved or not. But who knows? And I recall a question about intrauterine connection. I don't think that that's a factor. And the only reason that I'm saying that is that with identical twins, still they've been in there together.
Yeah.
They
same cells.
Different. Yeah. They sometimes have different bases and personality structures. So
of course, most of the time.
Just that there's not an impact there.
There was a comment from Florence Durka here saying that she has tested that from twins coming from the same cells, most of the time they don't have the same base. So that's going to be a big part for the future researches. So it's fascinating. Thank you so much. And that leads directly to the phase questions and how the structure is structured. And I'm going to start with a question. My studios are telling me I don't have to speak in French anymore. So that's good because the translators are doing a great job. So we can keep in English. I'm just going to say the names. Thank you, translators. So there was a question from Karine Dupéré that was asking, I think she's in Quebec, and she's asking, what are the causes that can bring distress in the PPI? You know, the DS on our you know what?
Yeah, an individual who has that determination is showing on the PPI inventory results that they're spending more time in base distress than in phase distress. Why? What is the reason? The reason is simple. That the person is experiencing, again, the distress through that base phase issue, and not once again allowing themselves to feel the underlying, authentic, enriching emotion that would stop that distress, even though they must have originally. And so what is it that, what kind of distress would that be related to the issue? Any issue distress has to be quite profound. If it's take thinker distress, if the issue is loss, it isn't triggered. The distress isn't triggered again by, I lost my glasses, or I lost my keys. Any issue always is triggered by a profound event. And it's quite rare, really, in life. Most of the time, we will not see this. But then it would take a major loss again to move down to my base thinker in order to have a response of second degree distress there. So, by the way, it could be a physical ailment, because how would I might interpret that? I interpret that as I have loss of my life now. I have loss of mobility. I have loss of, so whatever the issue is, it might be tied to then physical distress and interpreted that way, or again, the same kind of major profound distress event.
I think that relates to another question from Douglas Grant that it's a PTM related question. So I do believe that some PCM trainers are not going to be aware of the concepts here. So maybe we want to explain just a little bit, but I think it's a relating question to what we just said. So it's like, could you say that something about the time bombs and the atypical structures, maybe to clarify some of the things that you've said?
I remember using that phrase many, many years ago, and I don't use that phrase again. Let me share with you what I meant by it, and what we can now say that is more precise rather than using that terminology. When as we are in our developmental stages, each stage has with it the potential for our phase issue of that corresponding stage to be either resolved or unresolved. Now, let me give an example so we can.
Oh, yes, please.
Yes. So thinker phase. Now, as I go through my 6 developmental stages, none of those will impact whether or not later in life I resolve or or not, I'll say it differently. There's only one of those stages that's important in my early development if I'm thinker, base, and phase. And that's going to be the developmental stage that connects with that phase. The one that connects with the thinker phase is the solution stage in late toddlerhood. And so at that time, it's important that I have a possibility of experiencing loss, because my world through my thinker base perception is thinking. Well, I can't think through loss. That's why in that stage, it's very important for caretakers to provide me an opportunity to realize I can't think through everything. What does that mean? It means that they let me attempt things that are reasonable, but that I cannot accomplish, so that I can know what it's like to feel my sadness about it, or that I have an opportunity to see mother go away for a day or whatever, so that I can have that separation and feel my loss. That resolves the time bomb later in life. There will be no phasing. So the time bomb was a reference to phasing. Let's define phasing. Phasing is that time that we are attempting to deal with the underlying authentic emotion. Phasing is the time in second degree then that we have intense and frequent distress, because what's under it is this, what I used to call time bomb. In essence, it's the unresolved issue. And so there are no time bombs if our issue is resolved in the corresponding early developmental stage. Does that make sense?
Very much to me. I'm going to make the point in French just to clarify, because I'm not sure our interpreters are able to translate that. So it's just, les time bombs, c'est comme des bombes à retardement, où en fait c'est la problématique de la phase qui s'est créée dans la petite enfance et qui du coup va ressurgir dans le passé. C'est pour ça que je trouvais que cette question était importante, puisque du coup elle correspond au stade de développement de l'enfant, et c'est toujours intéressant du coup par rapport à la structure. Et donc il a eu ce qu'il dit, c'est qu'il a changé, il a évolué sa pensée par rapport à ça. Et du coup, aussi quelque chose qu'on va retrouver qui est nouveau dans notre manuel 1 en français, c'est cette notion de phasage. Et du coup, ce phasage, c'est la période où la personne, elle a réactivé une problématique qu'elle avait eu du mal à gérer dans sa petite enfance. Et du coup, on fera des masterclass spécifiques sur ce sujet dès cette année et sur les prochaines années, justement pour pouvoir clarifier cette notion de phasage sur laquelle, dans la formation de formateur, parfois on ne passe pas beaucoup de temps, et c'est normal, parce que du coup, c'est une question assez complexe. Donc, thank you so much, Taibi. And then some other interesting questions around the 3 degrees of distress and how it is structured, because in Friends at a Point, we were presenting the distress sequence of a condominium with base and phase added, but then we didn't have the stages in there, so les phases vécues n'étaient pas forcément additionnées. Donc là, j'ai eu beaucoup de questions sur justement les questions qui concernaient la façon dont on avait de présenter la séquence de stress sur 5 étages à un moment, chose que nous ne faisons plus maintenant, puisque du coup, on présente les séquences de stress de la phase et le stress de la base de manière distincte. Et du coup, je pense que c'était important d'amener, parce qu'il y a eu beaucoup de questions. Il y a eu Mitriche Aliona, il y a eu Aurélie Piron, il y a eu Jérôme Curnier, il y a eu Mickaël Dufourneaud. qui voulaient des clarifications par rapport à ça, et même d'autres encore. Donc là, je ne cite pas tout le monde pour du temps, mais encore une fois, on passera du temps pour traiter vos questions. So, to go back to that was about the stress related to the phase. Can you spend some time now to explain us how we can present that today?
Yes. I think instead of having a general, here's what always happens, I think it's much more important that we look at the dynamics of what's happening right now and why is it happening. And this helps clarify and understand. For example, we do know that the base driver will be the most frequent driver that we see. We also know that second degree distress that we see probably 99% of the time in someone's life is from the phase. When do we see the base distress occurring? Well, again, any movement to base distress has to do with the base issue resurfacing in our life. And so how often does that happen? I don't think that happens very often at all. If it does, it's very fleeting. Let me give you an example. And so I'm thinker-based, and we've discussed that the issue for the thinker developmentally is loss. Let's say that I'm in my harmonizer phase. So most of the time you're going to see me when I get into second degree, you'll see me with my drooper mask on, and I will have gone through my please you mask to get there. What happens if you see me frustrated? That's the second degree distress of thinker. Well, that would be my base. Why would I get frustrated? It would take like a rubber banding back to the issue of loss. So what might that be? Well, it's got to be something really important. And that's going to be subjective with everyone, but it's not likely to happen very often. As a thinker base, I can recall being frustrated, and even so, it's been for just a short period of time. And when I think about it, it has been connected with, oh, wait a minute, you didn't understand how important that was because it could impact seriously what might happen to you. And so if we have a different phase than our base, and if we think about what our base issue is, then how many times in life do we connect with the importance of that issue to the level that we would then respond in our base distress with it? And so the general formula back then of a person then goes from here to here to here, it's not inaccurate, it's just not precise. And it's more important to look at the situation involved, and that explains it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to say a few lines in French just to summarize what was said. It's so important for us in France. Donc pour résumer ce que vient de dire Taibi, c'est pas que c'est faux de présenter les séquences de stress associées, parce que finalement ça revient à ça, c'est d'associer les séquences de stress de la base et de la phase. C'est juste que c'est pas assez précis pour lui. Mais en gros, ce qu'il préfère qu'on dise, c'est donc de décorréler les séquences de stress, d'avoir la séquence de stress de la phase actuelle, qui est celle qui est la plus évidente, la plus quotidienne, celle qu'on voit tous les jours, et puis les autres comportements sous stress, qui seront ceux de la base et des phases vécues. Et je dis bien des phases vécues, puisque quand on parle de phase, du coup, la base est une phase vécue, quand la personne a changé de phase. Et donc, du coup, c'est comment vient s'interférer là-dedans ou s'intégrer là-dedans le stress des phases vécues. Et donc, du coup, ce que nous dit Taibi, c'est que le driver de la base est relié à « Ah, on ne parle pas la bonne langue, ce n'est pas mon canal de perception », alors que le deuxième degré des phases vécues va être lié à justement cette histoire de time bomb dont on parlait tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire des réminiscences de problématiques émotionnelles. C'est ce qu'on appelait des résurgences de problématiques émotionnelles. La personne est à nouveau confrontée à sa issue, c'est-à-dire à sa problématique émotionnelle. Thank you so much. That clarifies a lot. Sorry, I lost my questions. Oh, good, I'm back. Michel Saison, he's asking a question in English, so that's going to be easier for me. If the context needs of our activity makes us intensely use one floor resource for a long period of time, that floor should get stronger, and using its resources should consume less energy. As if this floor width would increase and the floors below did not change. So that was a question that it was a question that was asked a couple of times. So it's the impact of the situation on the condominium and specifically on that floor. So maybe we can give an example of continuing on what you're saying on the thinker floor. It's like if we have someone that has a structure with a small thinker floor at the beginning, and maybe on top of his condominium, and he spends a lot of time surrounded with a lot of thinker energy around him. Is there something that is going to happen developing that floor?
Yes. As we know, there are two things going on when we move to one of the higher floors in our condominium that are not our phase. One, to get there, we've got to be able to move the elevator, which requires getting the psychological needs met of our phase. Once we're there, then there's a certain bandwidth there. And that means that we just have so much energy to use when we're there. And naturally, what happens then is that the first thing we're likely to do is to go to our base and try to interact with the person or the environment there. And if we are required more to be in that floor, of which we've run out of energy, then we show the driver of our base as an advertisement to say, this is the floor that I'm more open to. And sometimes we get into an English idiom burnout, and we just do not have the energy to stay in the floor. What happens if we want to build that floor, or we really want to stay in that floor? Does that mean that we can? Yes, but only to a certain degree, and it will never be more than any of the floors under that. We just naturally are not able to do that.
Thank you. There's another idiom in PCM that I like is to say it's from the last floor we have the best view. That for me relates to that. C'est du dernier étage qu'on a la meilleure vue. J'aime beaucoup cette idée. Et l'idée, c'est bien de dire que quand on investit beaucoup de temps dans un des étages les plus hauts, en fait, non seulement celui-là va grandir, mais tous les autres en dessous vont grandir en même temps. Which relates also to our question is like, how do we do to develop the higher floors? That's a question from Dominique Janteur. It's a question that comes back and forth pretty often too. Is how do we do to develop a floor?
Yeah. See, the Germans have an expression, don't they? Übungen macht den Meister.
Yeah.
Practice makes perfect. Practice the behaviors and see how much we can tolerate. I recall with my imaginer floor being last many, many years ago, I was invited to go and to experience a yoga class in which we meditated. And,
I can imagine you in the yoga class.
and although it's my phase now, when I sat there, I for a little while, and then it was within just a minute or two that I thought, how long is this going to take? What did I do? I had dropped down to my thinker. I wanted information about time. How long is this going to last? So we can practice. Perhaps the easiest, best way to exercise those top floors, be around people whose base or phase is that floor that we want to expand. That way we'll use more what? Channels of the floor, perception of the floor, and maybe some of the character traits to exercise that muscle.
Oh yeah, coaching.
Yeah, yes.
I want to change topic, and I go directly to a recurring question, especially for French trainers that were a lot, not confronted, but used to use those questions. It's like there was a question, but I took this one, but there was a lot of question around the existential questions, and that question was from Michel Lafon. It was if you were to redefine the existential questions of the 6 types, what word would you use today, especially the basic one for imaginer? And I think it's important for you to say what you have to say around existential questions. I know you have provided a specific document, and I am translating it right now to be able to share it with everyone.
Okay, there are several things with that question, and one is when you say an imaginer type, I immediately think, okay, are we talking perception, or are we talking face? And I'll give you a brief history. 30, 40 years ago, my good friend and brother, Hedges Capers Jr., inserted existential questions as a kind of a learning exercise in a seminar that Spencer Schenck Capers was doing on PCM and other things out in Los Angeles. I don't believe that we should have existential questions in our seminars. I believe that for several reasons. One is that there's no research to identify that there's mutual exclusivity. And if you like, we'll talk about mutual exclusivity later, he said with his Be Perfect. For example, if we say the existential question of thinker, are we talking about of the thinker perception or thinker psychological of the phase? And if it's am I competent, it's not mutually exclusive. If we put that in an inventory, we would not have statistical valid response to it, saying that matches something more, exactly matches without it matching anything else, the thinker. Because if I go to my persister floor, I can say, I believe that I'm competent. And so I might respond that way too. So first of all, what is an existential question? An existential question is a philosophy about philosophical hypothesis about what is the purpose of someone or something. And we already know that. We don't have to bring in philosophy into PCM because we already know what's the purpose of a thinker's thoughts perception. The purpose is so that I can be logical. What is the purpose of the thinker's phase? so that I will have recognition of my productive work and I can accomplish. And so what is the purpose for the imaginer? Perception. It's so that in my inactions, I can be imaginative. And what is the purpose of getting my solitude needs met so I can be alone and have my own alone time? We already have the answers to this. So what I'm saying is, I do not believe that it's of value to have existential questions because they're a philosophical topic that doesn't have a basis like we already have with the research. And then the second part would be, it's going to take up time in the seminars to talk about it. That's why one of the things that we've always said is, when you're teaching PCM, teach PCM. If you want to talk about how Myers-Briggs connects, then talk about that after the seminar. Use it when you're marketing, but it's not to be pulled into the seminar because you're losing precious time.
That's a good question. That's a good conclusion to that. I'm going to rephrase that because I think it's great. C'est une question que j'avais eue moi aujourd'hui. C'était est-ce que je peux faire présenter de la PCM avec d'autres outils? Et en fait, ça rejoint très fort ça, parce que du coup, ce que dit Taibi sur la question existentielle, c'est que c'est des questions qui sont déjà sans validation scientifique et qui, pour lui, sont des hypothèses philosophiques. Et donc, il pourrait y en avoir plus, il pourrait y en avoir d'autres. Et c'est surtout ça son point. Il ne critique pas les questions existentielles. Au contraire, il les a toujours appréciées. Maintenant, pour lui, ça vient après les séminaires PCM pour pouvoir faire de la philo. En gros, on se fait un café philo autour des questions existentielles. D'ailleurs, ça serait peut-être intéressant qu'on se fasse ça dans les PCMD. On se fait un café philo autour des questions existentielles, ce serait cool. Et oui, on peut bien sûr en parler, on peut disserter autour. Maintenant, quand on présente PCM, ça vaut le coup de rester sur le sujet, puisque du coup, tout ce qui a été validé scientifiquement, pour le coup, est présentable de manière factuelle. Voilà. Je résume rapidement, mais c'est à peu près ça. Et puis, je vois qu'il y a des choses sur les traductions. On vous fera des traductions plus détaillées et plus précises. Après, on va reprendre des morceaux de ce que vient de dire Taibi, on va les décomposer, on reviendra vers vous avec d'autres choses là-dessus. I have one more question because the time is flying, and thank you so much, Taibi. I had a question about from George Goldman, because you know in France we've used the perceptions and especially one in particular, which was the imagination perception, the image in action perception, the in / whatever action behind it. And now in the new material, we're going back to inactions, parentheses, reflections. And that's back to the origins, back to the beginning. So it's very important for me if you can say a few words around that for the French community that sometimes has trouble understanding why we're going back to that, because for some of them, it sounds very pejorative to say inaction, because it's like nothing is happening.
Let's remember that our model is predicated upon observing behavior. And so what are we observing? And then now let's go back to the history of the development of this. For perhaps a century or more in psychiatry and psychology, when talking about human behaviors, people have, psychologists have addressed, people have feelings, they have thoughts, and they have behaviors. And then Paul Ware, a psychiatrist, wrote about, hey, it's important that there's an order of these. Each person has a certain order that they experience these in their life. And so back in the middle 1970s, when I wanted to validate the personality pattern inventory, and I realized that it's just as important to look at distress behavior as it is to, for every distress behavior, there is a correlation with a positive behavior, then I wanted to study these feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. And in doing that, in the research, then we discovered that there were two kinds of thoughts that we could observe and that people had. And that was thinking and opinions. I changed the terminology of feelings to emotions, because in English, feelings also means, what am I feeling? And so emotions is, what am I feeling? And then there was a differentiation among three kinds of behaviors. People showed actions, people showed reactions, and people showed inactions. Well, how do you show inactions? Well, Mickaël, let's demonstrate that.
Let me know.
Are you ready? We'll do an experiment for people. Let's do
it.
All right.
Ouais, ça c'est bien. I'm just going to say a few words around that, because this is he went back to Polware. Pardon, sorry, always in English. Il est revenu à ce que vous apprenez tous en formation de formateur sur les portes d'entrée de Polware, et après sur justement leur analogie et comment lui il en avait tiré ses conclusions à lui. Donc je ne vais pas vous refaire l'historique que vous connaissez déjà. Maintenant, ce qu'il propose, c'est pourquoi est-ce qu'on appelle ça inaction, et pourquoi est-ce que ça fait sens d'appeler ça les inactions au pluriel. Pour justement faire une démonstration, il propose de faire un exemple. Alors, je ne sais pas pourquoi avec moi, peut-être parce que j'ai une base rêveur, ou je ne sais pas, on va voir. Is it because I have an imaginer base that you want to do an experiment?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Or that you have an imaginer floor, and I'm going to address that imaginer.
Oh, great. Let's do that then. I am ready.
Yeah. Picture what someone would look like showing inactions. Picture what you're going to be doing after this seminar.
I know that.
So what do we see? Well, we observe that there is inactions. Now, we can hypothesize and later realize that the purpose of that is to sift through and to then reflect on how am I going to respond to that. That's much different from the words, tones, gesture, posture, and facial expressions of any other floor perception. And so the answer is it has to do with research. It has to do that we are observing the lack of behaviors, literally, which also is a way of saying, well, okay, so if it isn't emotions, thoughts, opinions, and actions and reactions, we know there are 6 personality types, and I just saw him not do too much. Except that if we were into the Bandler and Grinder model,
yes, the eye movement thing.
We just saw him look up left for something, but yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, because this is explaining, and also it's easier that way for me as a trainer to explain it positively, because it makes sense. It is positive. It is reflection. We are reflecting with images.
Yeah, I believe that I did that several times today.
Mm-hmm.
I will look again at the video.
Yes.
And my hunch is I paused before I responded, and that had to do with my imaginer floor.
I had so many questions to go through again today, and I want to respect your time and everybody's time. And we have reached the conclusion now. So thank you so much, Taibi. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here with us and for all your clarifications, your explanations. They're so valuable for us. So we're going to continue doing these interactions with you and benefit from your training. Thank you so much. We will have more webinars like this, and I'm saying this for the community. The next one, the next webinar in France is going to be on June 10th around our new application that's going to be called the Daily PCM, the new announcement of Daily PCM. That's going to be an important day for us also, and for the community starting using and being able to use that app that we've been working on for so long. So all the other questions, we're going to come up with creative solutions on how to answer all the questions that are left unanswered today. Please, guys, I'm going to finish in French. Merci beaucoup d'avoir posé toutes ces questions. Elles sont tellement importantes pour nous, et vous avez vu que c'est vibrant de passion et vibrant d'interaction. On a la chance de pouvoir continuer à les poser à Taibi en personne, et on ne va pas s'en priver. Ça va être des webinaires, ça va être des vidéos directement avec lui, ou ça va être des petits moments comme ça. N'hésitez pas à continuer à nous poser vos questions. On va faire une banque de questions. On va faire en sorte à ce qu'on puisse y répondre le plus vite possible. Je pense qu'on en a couvert quand même pas mal ce soir, et il y en reste encore beaucoup à faire, à traiter. Et il faut que ce soit fait. Donc, on va venir avec des solutions créatives, comme je l'ai dit. Thank you so much, Taibi. Thank you for your time. And we have reached the time. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Merci à tous. Merci pour votre passion, pour votre engagement. C'est génial. Vous avez été plus de 300 ce soir, et on va continuer comme ça, faire des webinaires réguliers qui pourront apporter des réponses à toutes vos questions, car c'est tellement important que la communauté continue à vivre. Cyril, tu es revenu. Tu veux finir? Ah, il y a un mot pour la conclusion. Tout le monde s'en va.
Un grand merci à vous tous. Thank you again, Taibi. On vous enverra, au privé description, vous envoyez toutes les informations que vous souhaitez, des réponses aux questions. Sur les traductions, il y a eu des moments un peu moins complets, et on va corriger ça aussi dans nos prochaines news. À très bientôt. À bientôt pour le 10 juin, pour le prochain webinaire, avec des bonnes nouvelles. Et Taibi, à très bientôt aussi. Au revoir.